Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. I'm Chris here with Tony, and our guest today is Janet McConnell. Janet is a bodybuilder, a speaker, a trainer, and the author of Elements of Aging Well. We are very excited to speak with her today. Janet, welcome to the show. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chris and Tony. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I'm very excited. Well, let's begin with your story. It sounds like you have a pretty compelling story. So starting at the beginning, what got you into fitness and bodybuilding?
I don't know how far back you want me to go. Should I start with, conception and then just go?
Start wherever you want to
Uh,
start.
Well, I can give a little bit of context and then I'll start where it started. So I grew up in a family that was really health oriented already. I was one of those weird families in the 60s, 50s and 60s where my parents were vegetarian and were active and loved outdoors, and we spent a lot of time out, and we didn't own a television. I just grew up outside a lot and was very active in sports and really healthy and kind of a robust kid because I had really good nutrition starting out. I became an adult and my career started, got married, and got really enamored of my career and just threw myself in. I really felt like a grown up because I was bringing in a paycheck and doing all these amazing things. And I just kind of took my health and my strength and my well-being for granted because I'd always been so. I didn't think it was something you had to maintain because it was always there. I felt like, well, of course, this is just who I am. And yeah, there's unhealthy people around me, but I'm not, and I'm
Right.
fine. And so I just went about my life. So with all of the airline traveling and schedules and late meetings and airline food, and I mean, it goes on, all things that
Yeah.
caused I got into my 40s. Guess what? It's no longer free.
Yep. There's a switch that flips.
And there's a switch. And I didn't even, I mean, I was gaining some weight, but everybody around me was kind of like that. And I just thought, well, man, this is just normal, I guess. And I didn't really care. I was really involved in what I was really pursuing. And then I went every year for my annual physical. And so I was 46 and I went to my annual physical, and my doctor ushered me into his office and closed the door because he was going to have a serious conversation with me, I guess.
Uh-oh.
He's like a dad,
Right.
we're gonna. So he said, Janet, I don't know what's going on, but you have very high blood pressure, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and you are borderline obese. You are on your way to early heart disease. And it was like getting smacked with a wet towel in the
Hmm.
face. I just couldn't believe my ears. I mean, I was a little bit brain fog, a little tired sometimes, and who wouldn't be? I was pretty sleep deprived. It made sense, but I just didn't really think of it as a concern. And so he said, "Here's a stack of prescriptions." Slid them across the table to
Oh
me.
no.
And I was
Oh
like, oh,
no.
whoa, whoa, whoa. That's what my grandmother takes. I am 46. And I just realized because it was almost like my life passed before my eyes when I was sitting there because I realized nothing was ever going to be the same. And I knew that before, in the way that I grew up and the way I was raised, involved some habits I was no longer following. And I just said, listen, I understand what you're saying, but you're not talking at all about exercise and about diet and about proper habits that take care of my health. And I want to try that first. Give me 6 months. Give me 6 months. And of course, my doctor was like, oh, here we
Yeah.
go. Somebody else who's, dodging reality. But he knew me pretty well. So he kind of said, okay, all right, fine. I'm going to call your bluff. Let's make the appointment right now for 6 months from now. You better show up. I know where you live. I went out to my car and had a meltdown because I realized I had bargained, but I had no clue where to start. I was just like, no plan.
It's a common issue.
Yeah. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, 6 months. And it would be really easy to just kind of go, well, I won't decide anything today. I'll just wait. And I thought, no, no, this is one of those things. I got to hop on it right now. So I pulled myself together and went back to work and I told my boss what had happened. And she said, well, Janet, they have hotel gyms, you can do stuff. And I said, yeah, but I don't even know what to do with that stuff. And she said, well, I have a trainer and he's really good and he'll motivate you. So at least you'll get started. You don't have to stay with him, but why don't you hire him, try it out, see how you like it. So I called him and turns out he was a really good trainer and his only availability was at 5 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Oof.
So I went from doing nothing to doing that. I don't recommend it, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was extreme times call for extreme measures. So I thought I'm going to become an even more morning person than I already was.
Mm.
So there I was at 5 a.m. on Monday morning, and we started in. And he just happened to be a resistance trainer, bodybuilder discipline in the grand scheme of what you can do to get fit. And it turns out I loved it because it was very basic, straightforward, no guesswork. The iron never changed. It was always the same. And I would measure myself against that. And I could see myself getting stronger. I started feeling better. I felt more confident and energized. Within a month, I was already feeling a lot of internal changes in my
Hmm.
mindset. That was the first thing. And then I started sleeping better. And then I started
Oh,
getting hungry at weird times. Like, how am I going to lose weight if I'm always hungry? And so I learned a little bit more about eating the right foods that
right.
satisfy and in the right amounts and the right timing, and just started out that way. And 6 months later, I went back to my doctor and I had lost 38 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
It wasn't like the Ozempic face kind of weight loss. It
Right,
was,
right.
you
Yeah, you're
know,
adding muscle. You're
right.
not just, you probably converted that
Yeah.
much more to muscle.
Right. Yes. It was a trade-off. It was a direct trade-off. And then some because some of the fat. And that was really just with exercise because I wasn't being strategic at all with my food. I just tried to eat more vegetables, have some more chicken,
Sure.
like a little bit more. I needed more calories. I wasn't eating enough calories. Here I was overweight and not eating enough calories.
But
Yeah.
malnourished and overweight. If you're not eating properly, I mean, you know the refrain, right? I'm having 3,000 calories a day, but 30 grams of protein it's you can
Yeah.
have a terrible diet and still be in a calorie surplus.
That's right. That's right. It doesn't, it's a funny thing about the tribal fighting about whether vegan or carnivore or Mediterranean, what's the best one, when at the bottom line, first get the metabolic balance in
Right.
place.
Yeah.
And if
Yep,
you're eating whole foods, no matter what it is, you're going to be okay.
it's going to be better.
Make sure that it's something that's sustainable for you so that you can actually
Absolutely.
live that
That's
way.
very
So
important.
here I was in my doctor's office. He's like, fist bump, you did great. So
Yeah,
I'm going to see you. Your normal time is in 6 months when I'm going to see you for your annual physical. So
sure.
we'll see. He goes, I'm putting these prescriptions away for now, but they're here.
Right,
So because all of my blood work was in the safe range. So he tested
right.
all of it and it was normal. And I was still a little fluffy, but way better. Then I got back to the gym and thought, well, I'm gonna keep doing this because I really liked it. I liked my trainer. I liked the routine. It had already become part of my lifestyle. There was something missing. I needed a new, big, hairy, audacious goal. The other
Hmm.
one, I dodged that bullet. I didn't have to, take all those prescriptions and I was healthier. But now what? What's the next thing? And right about that time, these two ladies who were just a little bit younger than me came to the gym to train with a trainer that was nearby. And so I could see what they were doing. And I had my eye on them because I'm telling you, they were jacked. They were just, shaped, had carved shoulders and amazing quads and like little washboard abs. And I was just stunned because they looked so amazing. And then I noticed They were lifting the same weights I was lifting. I was curling 20-pound dumbbells. They were curling 20-pound dumbbells. 500-pound leg press, they're doing it too. Like I was like, okay, trainer, why do they look like that? And I
Hmm.
look like this, and we're doing the same thing. Because to me, I was doing all it took already. And he said, oh, those ladies. Oh, Janet, those are bodybuilding competitors, and they're 5 weeks away from having to be on stage. So they are dialed in and they are eating
Right.
extremely strategically. They
Sure.
have to eat in a certain way because they have to lose fat and not lose muscle.
Yep.
And I was just like, what are you talking about? So they just like starve? No.
Lots of protein.
Because if you starve, you
You
have to
lose the
remember.
muscle.
I know, but you have to remember, I grew up in a time when women were told, skip supper, skip breakfast, you'll be able to fit in your jeans again.
Right.
So just deprive yourself. And that was always the way to kind of regain control of a expanding waistline. Doesn't work, of course. And also, why would you diet off all that work, all that muscle
Yeah.
that works so
Right.
hard, especially for women? I mean, that it takes longer, just because of the metabolic
Sure.
balance that we have. So I was like, you mean to tell me all this standing in my way is the diet? And they said, yep. And I said, well, come at me, bro. I want the diet. And he was like, oh, I don't know. It's really hard. Most people quit and you won't like it. Even more reason I want
Give
it.
me a goal. Give me a goal.
Yeah.
Make it hard. Yeah.
And tell me I can't do it, you
Right.
know, and then I'm all over it. So yeah, so we started in again. And a year from that day, I was on my first bodybuilding stage
Oh, that's
at,
Wow.
incredible. That's
I was
incredible progress.
40,
Age
48
40,
by, yeah,
48.
yeah,
Wow.
for my first one. Thank you. And
That's remarkable.
I'm next year. I mean, I've competed multiple times into my 60s. Next year, I am competing at age 70, and I'm going to be in the
Oh,
70 and up
wow.
class. So
Wow.
there won't be very much competition. I'm hoping I get first prize.
Well, I hope you get first place. I hope there's lots of competition. You still get first place.
First prize, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. Janet, I have a similar story, except I was 29 when my doctor said, you're gonna have to start taking this medication if you don't clean up your lifestyle. And I actually was on the medication for a couple of years, and then in my early 30s was able to kind of change course and get off of it. And we'll go more into this later, but I do want to ask, when you're dialing in the nutrition for bodybuilding, now as an endurance athlete, 60% of my calories come from carbs.
You
I do
bet.
supplement protein. What is your macro balance when you're getting ready for a competition?
Well, what I tell people is it's very important. This touches on a broader topic of
Yeah.
whatever the thing is that you want to do, running, biking, pickleball,
Mhm.
hiking, bodybuilding, strength, like powerlifting, whatever it is, even CrossFit, you need to eat to feed that sport.
Yep.
So there is no one answer. So when I tell people, well, this is what I do, and they're like, well, I'm not doing that. And I say, well, you also aren't going to be getting on a bodybuilding stage. So it's okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
do that. I mean, when you think about it, a sumo wrestler, these big, huge, what they eat to maintain that girth in order to excel at their sport. Now think of a horse jockey at the Kentucky Derby, five
Yeah.
foot five, weighs like, 110 pounds. They're both athletes. They're both at the top of their field. Would they ever trade dinner plates? Never.
Yeah.
So
Probably not.
I want to make that a statement first before I say what I do. So when I'm in competition mode, so probably
Mhm.
I usually start about 8 months out because I'm
Okay.
older and skin is a factor. I
Mhm.
don't want to go so fast that my skin looks drawn and droopy and
Sure.
crepey. And you need to give your elastin a little chance to kind of keep up. So it has to go. So any weight loss has to go slowly. And
Mhm.
also don't let myself get really huge off season.
Right.
bulking is fine for dudes if they want to do that, but I don't think it's a good idea for women over the age of 50 because then you've got loose stomach skin to
Right.
to contend with. So I switch over to kind of the opposite of an endurance sport. So you guys eat carbs like Pez dispenser.
Right. Yeah. During a race, it might be actual Pez. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a fan. But yeah, you have to be on that because you're burning calories at such a high rate.
Yeah.
For me, what I have to do is we had to figure out first, I do like about 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight a day.
Okay. That's a
So it would
lot.
be,
That's a lot of
yeah,
protein.
That's a lot of
it's a lot
protein.
of chewing.
Yeah. Right.
I tell people that chewing is also cardio.
Yeah.
So
Right. Good jaw muscles.
You
yeah,
can drink it though, you know.
you can drink it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you learn in that all the different strategies, like, obviously cooking a lot of the food ahead of time, or you end up just
Sure.
being in the kitchen all the time. So you get your hamburger patties and your chicken breasts and your
Hmm.
all of your different things that you want to have that are meat or fish or eggs. Get that all ready. And then you can also supplement with protein shakes, and you have to find out which blend works for you. So there's a little bit of research involved because
Yeah.
your own metabolism, some people don't metabolize whey protein very well, but there's other alternatives. And some plant proteins too. The thing with plant proteins that I had to be careful of is they are also carby. So I had to be
Mm.
careful about carbs
And they don't
involved.
taste as good. The
Right.
whey protein shakes taste better.
Yeah, they do.
I
They do for
I've
sure.
got pea protein powder, and
Yeah.
I I've had the same box of pea protein powder. It's probably expired by now.
I know
Oh,
some
I
of
go
them.
through a bunch of it every week, so I'm a
Yeah.
vegetarian, so
Well, and
Yeah.
you can add like avocado, like ripe
Sure.
avocado and spinach, and you can do stuff to make them taste better, and still get all of your veggies and stuff. But yeah, I know what you mean. And some of the vegan protein powders are better than others. Some of them taste like dirt, but
yeah.
others are actually really delicious. So yeah, you have to kind of
Right.
try a lot. But anyway, so I do that. And then the other puzzle for a bodybuilder is to figure out what to do with the rest of the calories. So it's going to
Right.
be fats, healthy fats, and
Yep.
complex and simple carbohydrates.
Hmm.
And so this is what I learned is that some people do better with more carbs and less fat. Some people like the opposite, and some people like about an equal amount of grams. And it just depends on the
Hmm.
person. So we experiment a lot. Before I have to lean out, try one way and then see what happens. And then try the other way and see what happens. And so it's kind of like your body does become a science experiment, especially at the beginning of
Right.
this. And it changes every year. So the diet is never, okay, back to the same old. No, it has to be different because then you have more muscle, you're older, your metabolic needs change. And so you
Right.
have to be very flexible with that and be open to shifting and changing.
You
So
got to tweak it. You got to
yeah.
tweak it.
Does that answer your question pretty
It
much?
does. No,
Yeah.
thank you. That's excellent. Let's talk about your book.
Okay.
So you wrote Elements of Aging Well.
Yeah.
Um, there it is. For those listening, she held up a copy, and we will link to that in the show notes if you'd like to read it. What inspired you to write the book?
Waking up on my 65th birthday at 4 a.m., kind of one of those, like where you just wake up with a big gasp and you realize it's my birthday. And I've been telling myself for years I was going to write a book. So my thought was, am I going to wait another 5 years until I'm 70 to write this book? Or am I going to start right now?
No
And
time like the present.
that's right. I got up out of bed and wrote my first chapter at the kitchen table on my
Oh
65th
wow.
birthday. It ended up being the last chapter in the book. And then, the other stuff was first. So I started out with, well, everybody said you need to write a diet and exercise book for, women over 40. Okay. So I started out with that. And then I thought, wait a minute, because I was kind of bored writing it, which isn't a good sign. And I realized it's because there are 10,000 books out there for women on how to lose weight, how to gain muscle, how to be more healthy, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, okay, I want some of that in there. I have a chapter on each, but it needs to be more. So for your listeners out there who are probably nodding their head, yep, there's a lot of books out
There's a
there.
lot of books out there. I've read a lot of them.
Right, right. They all
Fewer
have
for
a,
women, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and the things I have in here apply in a broader sense to men as well, but there are some very distinct differences in how everything works in the muscle
sure.
building and weight loss game. So I thought, what does a 65-year-old woman have to say about this that wouldn't be coming out of the mouth of a 30-year-old or an
Mhm.
influencer? And I thought, oh, I know what it is. It's perspective. It
Mhm.
is wisdom. Wisdom really is a distillation of experience and, mistakes. It's a story to tell. And it's not like this is how the world works. It's more like, no, this is kind of a way to think about this so that you
Yeah.
can draw it in.
An
And
approach for figuring out the world as
yes,
opposed to
yes.
the answers. Right. Sure.
Well, because for people, and especially women over 50, we're well aware that we're not getting ready for a bikini body. It's not a beach body that we're after. We're done with that idealization of what we should look like for the most part. And what we want is to feel good in our skin. We want
Hmm.
to feel vibrant, strong. We want to be able to pick up a grandchild that's running at you at full tilt and
Right.
not throw your back out. You want to be able to pick your suitcase up and put it in the upper bin without getting
Sure.
any. You want to be able to navigate, anything, stairs, getting in and out of cars, being able to, if you're traveling, if you want to travel. So depending on what it is you want to do, you have to have a body for it and a
Hmm.
strength for it. So what I added then was a chapter on resilience, a chapter on how to form habits. And I kind of bounced off of, James Clear's Atomic Habits, those principles, but distilled through the lens of being, women over 50. And how do you, you really can teach an old dog new tricks, it turns out,
Sure.
and how to have boundaries. Because one of the things that happened to me was when I started getting in shape and started angling toward that stage, is people were like, "You're going to be 52. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? I mean, at your age, what's wrong with you, And so I
What do
had
52-year-olds act like, though? I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah, I had to sort
At
of
least
get
some of them are bodybuilders.
it's well, and because what really is happening, and you know this from online stuff, when you have a hater come at you who tells you that, what you're saying is really dumb, and then you look and they have zero skin in the game, they have no posts, they're a nobody. Nobody is going to tell you you're doing the wrong thing if they're already successful. You know,
Yeah.
a successful author isn't going to tell someone they shouldn't write a book because they aren't ready. An opera singer isn't going to tell a teenager who's taking singing lessons, "Oh, you're terrible. You're never going to amount to anything." It's just like, who says those things?
Right.
It's
It-
people who are losing at the moment and see
Right.
you and don't like the mirror that reflects back at them of what state they're in.
so a
So
better question is, why are you not doing something?
yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I'll never forget one day because I took my food to work with me in little tubs,
Hmm.
and heated them up in the microwave. I was working at a university, a small private university in the marketing department, and there was an event that was outside on the plaza on the quad. So
Hmm.
everybody went outside. I thought, I'll just take my lunch out there and I'll just eat while I'm watching it. And this lady, the coworker who was obese, sidled up to me and she goes, "Aren't you?" I was eating fish. I was eating like, trout or something. And she goes,
Hmm.
"Aren't you afraid of getting lead poisoning? Like mercury poisoning. You eat, mercury poison." And I said, "Well, not as afraid I am as having heart disease and diabetes."
Statistically, one is more dangerous than the other.
Yeah.
I wasn't even prepared for the pushback. Because when you first start on a journey of health and you start to show progress, everyone's like, yay, go, go, you're doing great. You look awesome. And then when you start looking really good, and it's like you look like a different person, then they're like, ooh, maybe you should tone it down a little. Are you sure you're eating enough? Because I was losing weight, but my muscles were
Right.
staying, obviously, but I had to wear smaller size pants, so it's
Yeah.
like, oh. So I wrote about boundaries in here too.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a really great example though too of like how people assess risks, right?
Yeah,
Because they were worried about the lead poisoning or mercury poisoning from the
mercury
fish,
poisoning.
but you were aware of the actual health problems real people
Yeah.
actually face. And
Yeah,
people seem to push those to the side and they focus on something that probably never going to affect them.
Nope.
But
right.
diabetes, heart disease, likely chance it's going to affect us all at some point. So,
Yeah. Don't be afraid of things you see on the news. Be afraid of things so commonplace they don't make the news anymore.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
exactly.
good way of putting it. I like that.
So, what other insights would you want to share from the book that I love that tale about boundaries. What else is in there that maybe something that surprised you when you were researching to write?
I think that, well, it was more just kind of like this story that had always kind of stayed with me. Not a story, but an example, I think. When I got into bodybuilding and started to kind of remodel myself, I
Hmm.
started thinking about the metaphor of old cars. How we're kind of like cars. I mean, the metaphor matches up pretty well because we are mechanical and we do
Hmm.
take in fuel and we do give out waste and we do um, require upkeep and maintenance to
Hmm.
keep running, right? I mean, the only part that where the metaphor kind of breaks down is that cars don't get fat, but
That's right. Well,
but other than that, it's pretty solid. So I live in Arizona and it's a big state for motorcycles and classic
hmm.
cars. I mean, people just drive around in these amazing, like just the other day, I saw a 55 Chevy Bel Air. It was two-tone and it was just beautiful.
That's cool.
Everything. And the guy driving it, he's an older dude like my age, and he's got his wrist, and he's like just cruising along, 40 miles an hour on the freeway because he didn't have to go fast to show off. And I
Right.
just thought, oh man, there's another one. We are classic cars. We take this beautiful young car and we live in it our entire lives. We don't get to change them out. We live with this in this vehicle our entire lives. And the way you take care of your car all the way through means that you end up, if you do a good job, you end up with those beautiful 55 Chevy Bel Airs. It's just, it's so perfect. So that this has always been this idea in my head. Well, that first chapter that I wrote, we were in Durango, Colorado, where they have a narrow gauge railroad, the
Okay.
Durango Silverton Railroad
Yeah.
that was from the old mining days. And it's a great little tourist experience. And
Hmm.
so we thought, let's go on that. It was a nice day and beautiful scenery. So we're sitting on this train and we're surrounded by senior citizens because it's the kind of activity that you can enjoy even if you're very overweight or
Sure.
very unhealthy or weak. So it's like going on a bus tour. Like
Right.
a lot of more people can participate because it doesn't require a great amount of exertion. So I was just sitting there with my husband just enjoying it, but I was eavesdropping. And the things I heard old people saying to each other who were my age or maybe a little older. Oh, I used to go camping, but I can't anymore. It's too hard to get down on the ground. I used to go sailing and my boat, I got a really good price for it. I can't go anymore. There were all these stories
Mm.
of past glory days and what somebody used to be able to do, and they weren't able to do it anymore. And I just thought, we are riding in a train that is 200 years old. And all of its brothers and sisters are in scrap yards all over the country or in parks where kids can climb on these rusted hulls of trains. This car was loved. This car was nurtured and just a labor of love to keep it beautifully, in perfect working order. And it could just power up that mountain with no effort and just like it was young. And I just thought, that's it. That's going to be my metaphor for this book. And so that was probably one of my biggest, most powerful insights.
So almost
That's
like body
cool.
restoration. So,
Hmm.
and that's that's one thing that gets me too, and that's a general commentary I think on just Americans in general. It doesn't even have to be the ones that are older, but just the fact that like there's so many beautiful things in these parks and everything like that, and people are like, well, why do you run so much? Why do you run in these parks and do this stuff? And like that's always my thing is like because I want to be able to see everything in these parks. I don't want to go to the overlook. I don't want to be an overlook person. I want to be in it.
Yeah,
And you can't be in it if you're not healthy, you can't be in it. So one
That's
of the
right.
reasons to be healthy is so you can actually be part of
So
life.
you
You
can.
can be in all the parts of life. Yeah.
That's right.
I
I think
love
there's
that.
a statistic, something like 90% of people enjoy the national parks from less than 100 yards from the road.
Yes.
They're within 100 yards of the road the whole trip, and that's all the park they see.
Right. It's great that they have access, but what you miss. My
Yeah.
dad was a big hiker, and I remember when I was a kid, like a teenager, and he was always really physically fit. And we hiked to the top of Half Dome in Yosemite.
Oh yeah.
And and so when you start out, you're in Happy Isles, which is very level and it's really nice walking paths. It's beautiful, river going through it. And so there's lots of people and kids. And then you start up the ascent to Nevada Falls and Vernal Falls. And then as between Vernal and Nevada Falls, it drops dramatically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we got above Nevada Falls, and there's a campground up there where you can rest before you make the final ascent.
A little push, yeah.
There were like maybe 10 people camping overnight in the entire Yosemite Valley, and then now, of
Yeah.
course, above the valley. And that was as a child or as a young woman, I was like, oh, where did everybody go? We're different. We're different. We went farther than the average person wouldn't, that they just don't even want to try.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't. So let's talk about how having this additional muscle mass makes all this possible as you age. Maintaining muscle mass becomes more important as time goes on, as anybody who's ever gotten older knows. And it's a critical ingredient for longevity.
Well, and it's funny because not a lot of people really understand that yet. It's starting to come to the fore in
Mhm.
the literature and the research and in like the medical people that do all the podcasts, the big audience, the
Sure.
heavy hitters.
Peter Attia always describes it as an insurance policy against aging.
Gabrielle Lyon calls skeletal muscle the organ of longevity. And
Exactly.
that is absolutely true. And we have known for a while now. I think the Blue Zones study came out
Hmm.
in like 2006 or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, naming, all these places in the country where they have a concentration of centenarians that get to be 100 with no chronic disease and no illnesses,
Right.
no serious illnesses. So why is that? And then so in that study, the things that came to the surface were um, a really healthy whole foods diet, not always the
Hmm.
same kind of diet, but always involved some kind of whole food component
Yep.
and locally sourced, seasonal. So it was local to the culture and walking, cardio, the low level cardio, the low intensity sustained cardio that older people can do even if they have a little
Yes.
arthritis,
Mhm.
and community. So you have a group around you who's all believing the same and supporting each other and are there for emotional support. So those were the three main things. And then that's been sustained and it's still true. None of that is controversial.
Sure.
It's still true. But now what's coming forward is muscle mass. And it has come through, and since COVID even, there have been huge double-blind, peer-reviewed research that has risen to the surface with enough longitude to it to say this is efficacious. We know now that muscle mass is the single one most important thing, muscle size and strength, especially in the legs. So it's great for runners and hikers and bikers because
Yeah.
that's legs are everything, right?
Yep.
That is the biggest indicator for longevity because you can be sleeping well, you can have a great group of pinochle friends, and you can be eating super well and walking. But if you are frail and you are not able to maintain your independence, getting up and down out of a low chair, a toilet, I mean, to
Yeah.
be completely graphic, to be able to manage carrying your own weight, then you can be sort of maybe vascularly healthy, but you can't really function if you don't have muscle strength and stability and balance and a strong spine and back and the whole thing. And so it's really becoming a louder and louder message. And it's turning out that the problem with osteopenia and osteoporosis that women have more than men. And that comes from not eating enough protein, not building muscle, dieting it all off by the time, the thing I described of, skipping
Sure.
meat and just eating as little as possible. Eat your fruits and vegetables, but don't have that steak. It's got, too much fat on it or whatever.
Saturated fat. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But not having any protein or very little, it's very detrimental to the future of your healthy experience being old. The last 10 years of your life, what do you want that to be? And if you wait until then to make the change,
It's not
your
going to be
runway
good.
is really short. You
Gets a
can
lot
do,
harder.
yeah, I can always tell people, when should I start? Well, actually, you should have started 20 years ago, but the next best time to start is right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you say to somebody who's in their 60s who is having a hard time getting started? It's too late. It's I've got all these health problems. I can't turn it around. What do you say to them?
I said, well, is it time? Is it money? Or is it just lack of will? I mean, you have to figure out that because there's an argument for each one of those.
Sure.
Because if you have time to be sick, you have time to be fit. And also, the thing I know that's true for me, I mean, when I changed my life around, there was a situation I was in that was so miserable that I had to act. I couldn't just go on like that. And so sadly, that's sometimes what it takes us little human beings. It takes us being so miserable, like a rock bottom moment. What you have to
Yeah.
hope for is that rock bottom moment isn't a massive heart attack.
Right.
So if you want to take the risk of waiting until you have a rock bottom moment, you'll be motivated. There won't be a problem then. But why wait until it gets to that?
And
And
one,
yeah, so
yeah, I think it's great. And something, you talk about the motivations people have, and something I always find, and I obviously like money is one that's a hard one to overcome for a lot of things. But when it comes to time, you will find, I think, most people find times for the things that they really prioritize,
yes.
regardless. So it's just really a matter of, is this a priority of yours? And if it is a priority of yours, you'll find a way to do it.
Yeah, you can always say, if you want to know somebody's priorities, look at two things. Look at their calendar and look at their bank statement.
Hmm.
And that will tell you everything.
What are they investing their time in? What are they investing their money in?
Right.
Yep.
Because we all have some expendable income, some discretionary income.
Sure.
Where does it go? And so it's making those priorities shift around when you decide. I mean, it didn't take me long to shift it took me an instant practically. Once my boss said, I've got a trainer. I was like on it because I knew because I didn't have the habits. And that's the people we're talking about here. If you don't already have the habits down, it is so hard to start from
It
zero.
is.
It's hard.
It is very hard. But if you have a buddy or a coach or somebody who is aligned with you, I knew on the days when I didn't feel like going, I knew he was going to be sitting there looking at his watch, waiting for me, and I'd paid for it. So it's like, okay,
Got to do it.
just
Yep,
show up, just show up.
that's
He'll
it.
guide you through it. And by the end, I felt like $1 million, but going in, I sure didn't.
Yeah, that's
Accountability
the
is so
thing.
critical.
Is
Mhm.
yeah, finding and getting the motivation. I mean, and I always look at this because and I'm not saying this like I've always just been a naturally really skinny, wiry person. I'm now that I started running, I'm way wirier and skinnier than I even was before that. But sometimes you do look at people that, like when you hit these crises, and I do feel a lot of sympathy because I was like,
Yeah.
even the amount of working out I do is hard. Uh, but uh, but man, if you start from that rock bottom spot, man, that's got to be a daunting task. Like just to
Yes.
mentally wrap yourself around that, like and just buckle yourself down to it, and it's like I'm going to do this every single day. I'm going to live this new lifestyle that's totally alien to me every
Yeah.
single day to produce something way in the future.
And you want to, yeah, you want to just start with one thing. Don't try to do all the stuff. Like in my
Right.
story, I just did the exercise and fell in love with it and made it a part of my lifestyle. So it was a given now. I'm not going back. Then, oh, okay, the diet. Now I had a reason because I saw those girls. I'm like, whoo,
Right. You
that
got a
if they
goal.
yeah, if they can do it, I can do it. But I didn't do all of the exercise, the diet. And by the way, Janet, in a year and a half, you're going to be on a bodybuilding stage. Okay,
Yeah.
go. I would have been like,
Right.
no. And
Well,
it's you triggered something in my mind because I just posted a thing on LinkedIn this morning that I'm getting a lot of reactions on, and it's a quote from Jerry Colonna, who is a business mentor and a coach. But it's the stuff you learn in business about self-regulation and motivation. It plays out in the gym too.
mhm.
And it was the question, it's a journaling question. So when you're journaling, you can ask yourself this question: how am I being complicit in creating the condition I say I don't want?
Hmm.
That's a great question.
It's like a punch in the stomach. How am
Yeah.
I being complicit in creating the conditions I say I don't want? I don't like my little belly. I want to get rid of it. I don't like this. I want
Yeah.
to add more energy. Okay, how are you being complicit in creating that to
Right.
continue?
You get late night munchies, or you grabbing the bag of Oreos, or you make it a protein shake.
Yeah,
Because they both scratch the itch.
right, right. Or go to bed before you get hungry.
Or go
Yeah,
to bed, or
Yeah.
just drink some water. It could a
yeah,
million things.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and there's one other thing I want to people who are intimidated by getting started. Sounds like you're probably spending a lot of hours in the gym. My fitness routine is when I'm training for something can be 8 or 10 hours a week. The real gains come with the first couple of hours a week. Like the
Yeah.
most dramatic transitions are the
Mhm.
lowest hanging fruit.
Yes,
So,
yes,
yeah, okay, you don't have 10 hours a week to train for an Iron Man, but you got 30 minutes a day, a couple of days a week, right?
yes, yes. And I mean, remember my story, 3 hours a week
Yep.
for 6 months. So it's time under tension over time.
And you saw dramatic results from
Yeah.
3 hours a week for 6 months.
Yes.
And
That's
something
great.
while we're on this topic, I'd like to ask you another question. So you started at 46 and you're nearly 70 now. And it's something I think all athletes that especially as we're aging into athletics, do you ever find yourself, I guess, in situations where you're kind of like, why am I still doing this? Do you ever have what are your low points like? Because let's admit it, we all have some low points. I could
We
say
all
them every
have
now
them.
and then, like running and the runs just don't feel good, and you're just like, why am I still doing this? Why am I doing this? And then, hopefully you work through them. But do you ever hit those walls, and how do you cope with hitting those walls?
Yes. That's a good question. Nobody has asked me that. I think it's yes, because I mean, you talk to any star athlete, they're all like, well, you should have seen me last year. Um, I think that one thing that comes to mind is that there are setbacks in life. And as one of my trainers used to say, a setback is a setup for a comeback, which I love because
Like,
it's
yeah.
the right
Great.
mindset. and you learn from it. So I've had knee issues throughout the years from an old injury back in the 70s, And so I finally got a knee replacement back a year ago, January, and it's life-changing. It was such a good choice. But you know what? Any setback, that's a big one.
That's a big
But
one.
yeah, I was back at work in 2 weeks, did all my physical
Oh,
therapy. Yeah, I carried a
that's
chair.
remarkable. That's
I carried
remarkable.
I carried a chair around with me. So when I was training my clients and they were doing something stationary, I could sit down.
Yeah.
Maybe they called it Janet's director's chair. Where's her chair?
That's right.
So for a while, I mean, and I would just Uber, because I couldn't drive, I would Uber to the gym and then have my little chair. So
Mhm.
I was motivated and I knew that if I got right back to work, I would heal faster because I could be on my feet and down, up and down, up and down, and it would make me kind of get my energy back quicker.
Mhm.
It was a
Yeah.
while though before I could actually, do like lifting. I did my upper body fine, I
Sure.
could do that, but it really reflected on how much easier it is to recover when you're already healthy, when your body is already used to heal, pain, there's pain of injury, that's different than pain of growth. So
Mhm.
when you're recovering from surgery, that's pain of growth and healing, and it hurts. And yet I knew what it was. I'm not hurting myself here. I'm pushing a little bit and
Yeah.
I'll rest later. And then, it's like you're already accustomed to that differentiation of getting well is going to hurt a little bit and
Right.
it's okay and it'll get better. And it got better and better and better. And now I forget I had it. Within six
Yeah.
months, I was telling people, stop asking me how I'm doing. I've forgotten about it, because they're like,
Hmm.
how are you? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
so that's one setback I can think of, or a low point. Another one was getting to the point where I realized at first I've just wanted to win. I'm a very competitive person by nature, and it's been a good thing because it does make me, it motivates me, let's just say.
Mhm.
But I wasn't winning first prize. I was winning like third or fourth place in the North American National Championships. But when you think about it, it's it's in the top five of the entire Western Hemisphere.
That's
For
pretty
God,
remarkable.
I
Yeah.
know. And I have, the trophy and the pictures. It's right there. You can see it. See it right
That's
there.
like you can. I can't see it.
But getting that mindset around, why are you really doing this? Do you want the external validation? That's a nice little, sweet thing, but what about what's in here? Why are you really? So I came out of a low point with a realization that I'm really doing this as a showcase for what is possible. You don't all have to be bodybuilders. I'm talking to my clients here. You don't all have to do what I'm
Yeah.
doing,
Right.
but I'm an example of what's possible. So the fact that you are thinking it's too hard to be able to keep up on a hike down the Grand Canyon, it's possible. You have to set your sights on it, and that's what I'm an example of.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were
That's
some
great.
low points. I don't think that I've never really had a bottom out, you know, goodbye cruel world. I've never had that kind of
But,
thing.
but
I think I have
would
too
you
Well,
many.
do you
setbacks are
ever
setbacks.
do you ever
Yes,
have the moments though where you maybe don't love this you don't love the sport that day? Do you ever have
right,
those days where I
yes,
like this day I don't love bodybuilding, I don't love lifting
Yeah.
weights today. I mean sometimes it's just that,
yeah. But you don't
That
tell,
can be
don't
tough.
dare, you don't dare tell your trainer that because
Oh.
he'll give you religion.
So you mentioned something earlier when you were talking about, when you began your journey, that I want to kind of follow up on and kind of expand on. You mentioned that your mental health improved.
Yes,
Um, and I kind of want to dig into that. One, just the link between exercise and good mental health. I'd like to
sure.
hear what you have to say about that. But also, we are talking about as you age, and there is a robust link between physical fitness and reduced risk of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yes.
And I don't know about you. I have a fear of outliving my mind. I've seen it happen
Yeah,
to
yeah, of
family members. It's a scary
course.
thing. And so that's a motivation for me as well. Maybe we could talk about how exercise has impacted your mental health, and you seem sharp and with it. Obviously it's working for you.
Well, it is a fear because it does feel like it comes as a thief in the night, and we don't see it coming, and there's no obvious buildup. Like, when somebody's getting overweight and then they start to notice heart, it's like it's kind of you've had a lot of warning,
You
but
get some flags.
this one sneaks up on people. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that you're asking me this too, because I just gave a conference keynote a month ago today in
Wow.
Minneapolis on this very topic because of the whole idea of how resistance training is the
Hmm.
new number one thing for being able to fight dementia, being able to slow it
Wow.
down. Like if you get it, if you can stave it off. There's plenty of research that shows that in families where it's a genetic predisposition for it, they can take that next generation of family members and stave it off. Keep it and so that it isn't a death sentence. You're not just
Right.
going to get it because you have a family member. And for
Hmm.
people that have an early diagnosis or like early in, they get diagnosed and they start exercising. Like I've had a client with Parkinson's, early diagnosis. He came in and started training because his doctor wanted him to have good balance and good
Sure.
stability because of the
Yeah.
the symptoms of that.
Hmm.
And he kept coming back after his checkups and he would say, Janet, my doctor doesn't understand why I'm not getting worse
Hmm.
because he sees all these patients and there's a certain progression, a
Right.
speed, and he didn't fit the profile. And, 2 years later, he's still taking the same dosage to control the tremors. There's a little bit of medicine involved, but
Sure.
that's what made me curious. And I'm like, what does the research say? I dug
Yeah.
in, sure enough. So for neurodegenerative diseases, there is a protein called a neurotropic factor, brain-derived neurotropic factor that explodes into your body when you use your large leg muscles and your glutes. It is all over, but those are the big engines. And so
The
when
big
those
muscles. Yeah.
when those muscles do hard work, you get this shower of brain-derived neurotropic factor. And it doesn't stop here. It goes up into the brain and it helps keep those connections sharp. It repairs and it sloughs away the waste. It helps you form new connections. That's what we call neuroplasticity, right?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that the brain is always changing. And as long as you are learning and growing and you're using your leg muscles, you just get rid of so much of the risk of a dementia related disease.
It's so
And
powerful.
yes, and then, I mean, that's just, to me, it's magical. And they are starting to employ this method a lot in assisted living, in care homes and getting them to do leg things, like getting up out of
Yeah.
a chair, all that kind of stuff. Body weight, it works great when you're not super strong, then you start where you are.
You start
Um,
with what you got.
right. And then about just the another aspect of what you're asking too is just the anxiety and brain fog and some of the more kind of like chronic stuff as people living in the world,
Sure.
being exposed to so much fear and, the sky's falling and how to deal with that. And even in the workplace with stress and deadlines and all of that, it helped me so much. One of the things it did for me was it changed when something would happen to me at work, I would kind of go into a defensive stance. And I stopped doing that because I started being able to see more clearly what was going on and felt empowered to contribute to the solution. So when I got off of the leg press and thought, oh, I'm not going to do anything else today that's as hard as that. Okay, come at me, world. I'm ready.
Right.
Yeah.
You get kind of this square shouldered strength about you that you can handle what's thrown your way. So there's a confidence. It's not arrogance either. It's more of a quiet, self assured, I am capable. I was capable of that just now. I'm capable to handle the tough phone call or the difficult conversation or the review that maybe has some things I need to work on.
Right.
So, the stress and the mental health of that was very noticeable right away.
That's
I
powerful.
found it different. Was going to a therapist at the time because our company was in such disarray. There was a lot of bad juju going on.
Mhm.
And he just said, he was noticing me. He goes, Janet, you walk differently. I go, you mean I'm stalking like a guy, because I'm so like, no, no, no. You're walking with purpose. You walk with purpose. You walk like you know where you're going. And it was just like an unsolicited feedback. I wasn't asking for that feedback, but
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting.
It's
Wow.
great.
So your mental health was visibly improved. I mean, someone could see
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yes. Just more resilience toward facing adversity,
Absolutely.
handling, emotionally charged situation that just comes up. You can't really avoid stuff like that if you're out in the world.
No, if you think your life is going to be stress-free forever, life has other plans. I promise you that. I don't care who you are, what position you're in. You're going to have some adversity. You're going to have to overcome it. And if you've got better mental health and better physical health, you've got better tools in the toolbox to do so.
Right. Well, like Ryan Holiday's book, he's the guy that talks about stoicism and the philosophy. I think I have it right here. I do. I
Oh,
have my
cool.
The obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you are going down a path and it's hard and logs are in the road, you're probably going the right way. If it's
Right.
easy streets a red flag.
That I think that like also just like the fact that we live in a world that allows us to be so unphysically challenged
Mm.
on a
Yes.
daily basis. Like there's whenever I run a 100-mile race, like for about a month after that, my mental state is so much better because I just took that like 24 hours and I just detached myself from everything. It's just with my body out in the woods
Yes.
and it just clears it, like calms down all that constant hum of everything going on around us. It's kind of terrible for us. And
Yes.
it, but it, it breaks down to the same thing. Like your daily workouts are the same way because while you're doing those daily workouts, none of that stuff matters, and it just takes you down a whole level. And then like then you're able to when you face the world, you've got like a whole fresh perspective on it, and you
Mhm.
just feel clear. So
Yes. Yes. There's a chemical change that literally happens in your brain that allows that to happen, that euphoria and that feeling of I am empowered and I no longer am going to let those little gremlins get to me. It really is, it's a chemical cocktail that
yeah.
is fostered in your head that gives you that. I bet you are a fan of Rich Roll.
I've read his books, yes. I don't
Yes.
listen to his podcast, but I do.
You sounded like him just then when you said, when I go out and run a 100-mile race.
Yeah, yeah. What was the book he did on where he did an Ironman every day on every island of Hawaii?
He's amazing. Yeah. I
That's
love his.
incredible.
Yeah, I'm not an ultra marathoner, but what he's done for me is now I follow this woman who is an ultra marathoner, and she just finished a 300-mile 10-day trek in Lapland in northern Sweden,
Uh-huh.
dragging her own stuff behind her on a sled, like her tent.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
It was like, 30 or 40 pounds. And she's like, it's so
That's
inspiring.
incredible.
Yeah.
What a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When you're working with your clients, so we've talked a lot about motivation and setting goals and so forth. So when you're working with a client, a new client, someone who's maybe 60, how do these experiences that you've had inform the work that you're doing with your trainees, with your athletes?
One of the things that happens a lot is the women that come to me. The men don't do this so much, but the women have a lot of self-criticism, a tape in their head,
Hmm.
and they will. So it's a lot of working on that, and then there's a breakthrough. So, like for example, they'll sit on the leg extension machine, that works the quads, and it's right in front of the mirror. And when you sit, in a chair, the belly will kind of, it
Yeah.
kind of, you can't really hold your tummy in at that point. So it kind of shows. And they'll look at them and go, oh, look, that is so disgusting. Let's back up a minute. Would you ever say that to a little 5-year-old girl who was a little overweight, who was sitting there? No, I would never. I go, well, your little 5-year-old inside of you is listening. What do you want to say to her just now? And make them
Yeah.
rephrase what they're saying. And they're like, oh, and I tell everybody I'm an unlicensed therapist
Right.
because you end up
Yeah.
doing a lot of therapy, but it's like, getting them to understand that that is not helping and that what they're doing is actually heroic. Here they are directly addressing a problem and they're there for their own betterment. Why don't we rephrase it into some positive things? For the guys, one of the hardest things is they want to lift so heavy that they think they're going to die. They love that feeling of just being so superhuman, and that is not conducive to building muscle. I mean, you have to go back and say, okay, what are we really fighting here? What is the real demon inside of you that makes you want to be so self-punishing
Yeah.
and against your own desire to build muscle? So it's getting them to ratchet their ego back and realize it's a very clear path to what they're trying to do, but they need to trust the process and to be
Right.
patient with dropping the weight back and then slowly going forward using proper form.
Correct
And
form.
yes,
Exactly.
it's
All
the
the weight in the world does you no good if you're not doing the right. It's just,
I
sorry.
know. I know. Do you see, like doing the curls where they're like, ugh,
Yeah.
ugh.
You're gonna throw your back out and you're not gonna row your bicep.
Yeah, your
It's
biceps. You see how relaxed your biceps are right now?
Because
yeah,
you're using your
yeah.
back.
Your core's doing the work. So
I would say there have been some interesting clients that were really only with me for 6 or 8 months because they had a
mhm.
very specific goal. And once they reached that goal, unlike me, they were like, okay, I'm good. Like the lady that was turning 60 and wanted to be able to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh,
And
cool. That's a cool goal,
yeah,
though.
it's a cool goal. And she did it. And so we trained for about 8 months leading up to it. And she was already a casual hiker. So she was in good shape to
Sure.
start with, but she needed core strength and she needed upper body strength to be able to shoulder her
With
pack.
the pack. Mhm.
Women often on their upper bodies are a lot weaker. And so
Sure.
we had to work on that. And so I did the training with her and then assigned her to go climb the 12,000-foot peak in northern Arizona every weekend. And so she would get used to the more grueling
Nice.
and also the altitude.
Right.
And like an 82 or 83-year-old lady who wanted to visit all 7 continents and she'd only has 2 left. And she wanted to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef of
Oh,
Australia at
Yeah.
82.
me
Yeah.
too.
And so she got certified. I'm like, all right, I guess she's the real deal. So
Nice.
we trained she could drag her oxygen tank safely without hurting herself. I have pictures of her with her little mask and all the fish around her. And yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah.
I think
So, what is your strategy for managing clients' expectations and setting those goals? Do you have a strategy, or is it all personalized?
It's very personalized, especially
Mhm.
when you get people that are over 50. They're
Sure.
motivated by all different things. They're not about just, well, there was one guy who really just wanted to get in shape because he'd just gotten divorced and wanted to get out there and find
Yep.
some hot young thing. And he was like 62. He was very vibrant and very healthy already, but he needed to lose some weight. And so he was one outlier. Everybody else is more interested in being strong to do the things they love to do
Right.
and seeing what's happening with their parents, the generation ahead of
yeah.
them. How are their parents experiencing being 85? And they're like,
Right.
okay, I don't want that. So how can I fix that now? So there's that. And then there's the people that, love going to the Amalfi Coast, but they're worried they won't be able to do all the stairs or,
Sure.
being able to, like the lady that went to Kilimanjaro. But what are the activities that they love doing? My question is always, what do you love to do that you're afraid you'll have to give up when
Right.
you older? And so then that's what we form their protocol around that, because that's
Hmm.
what's motivating them. You know,
Sure.
that's what they're going to work for. That's what they want. And they like it that it's just for them, you know. It's very
I, the two things I found interesting that you said too earlier were, the motivations. You're talking about your clients' motivations, but if we go back, the insecurities, it sounds like the people have, men and women. Women's insecurities are the same ones, and men's are the same ones that they have their entire lives almost. So, you
yes,
talk about the
Hmm.
5-year-old, we still
yes,
have the same insecurities. Like the men have the egos, and the
yes,
women are still like very self-critical.
yes.
Unfortunately, my daughter doesn't listen to. My daughter's a ballerina. She's
Uh-huh.
and she's 18, but she's very, very critical of herself, and so I
Yeah.
see it at her age, and the fact that you still see that with your clients is kind of interesting, how the
Oh,
motivations may be changed, but the insecurities are the same.
yes. That's an interesting observation, because we often will, we'll be able to see in our kids, teenagers, some of those same traits and don't realize that we're still carrying them. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes some time. It takes, when we talk about self-love and all of those things, real self-love is taking it all in and going, all right, let's go. I'm doing this out of love for me.
Yeah.
And I'm
Right.
not criticize. It's so hard. And with young people, we didn't have Instagram and TikTok growing up.
Yeah.
We just had our little circle of meme
Yeah.
girls, but
Right.
didn't extend beyond that,
A
So
lot
it's
fewer people making us feel insecure.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it was a smaller group. Yeah.
Our circle of insecurity was smaller.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's very true. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you coach the athletes you work with? Do you coach them on nutrition as well as the exercise portion?
I do if they ask.
If they
So
ask.
it's one of the things where I let them start to get strong, feel good. They gain trust in me in that process and
Hmm.
what I have to say. And then I'm an example, obviously a physical example, but they also it's also honoring that idea of not overloading them, not overwhelming them with too
Sure.
much,
One thing at a
and
time.
waiting for them to say, what could I do? How should I get hungry snacking at night. What do you recommend? They'll kind of like sidle up with a question like
Sure.
that.
What do you
And
recommend?
yeah, oh, well, it's, the first thing is just getting all the protein in. If
Of
if
course.
you eat protein and fiber, those are the two things
Absolutely.
that lead to satiety. And then you don't quite have that same kind of craving. There may be a little bit of a dependence there, but you can substitute, like my ladies that love chocolate. They're like, ah, I said, well, chocolate's not terrible. It's
No,
not
there are
bad.
far worse things out there.
Yes. So go with real dark chocolate because it tends to
Hmm.
have less sugar.
Less sugar.
Yes. And then the other thing that I learned to do when I was leaning out and got a craving was I learned to make hot chocolate out of just cocoa. So just dark cocoa
Hmm.
is I mean, there's nothing in it that's gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
And the heat makes you feel very mollified. I think so the hot cocoa, sweeten it with some stevia or a sweetener that
Yeah.
doesn't have calories. I prefer not the chemically ones.
Right.
And a little bit of what did I use? Oh, almond milk. I used
Okay.
milk for the creaminess of it and to cool it down. And just have a cup of that when you're watching your little Dancing with the Stars before you go to bed. And that'll help a lot. And it does. I mean, I relied on that. I probably got that recommendation from somebody else that I don't even remember who it was, but it was really good. So that's one thing. But I think primarily getting enough calories in so that you're eating adequate number of calories to support your body weight, and then getting the protein and the fiber nailed down. And then I also found that it's better not to eat carbs, even the slow carbs like rice or sweet
Hmm.
potatoes, not to eat too much of that at night.
Sure.
Eat more breakfast, lunch, and maybe snack. And then for dinner, just go with your protein and your vegetable.
Protein.
Mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
broccoli or
Absolutely.
asparagus or something. Yeah.
So my next question, with when you're working with older athletes,
Yeah.
risk of injury is always a consideration. So how do you balance the gains that people want to make with that injury prevention?
Well, that goes back to the guys that want to lift more than they should.
Yeah,
It's like,
form
okay,
correction.
yeah, yeah, this is not sustainable, dude. So yeah, it takes some work. And some guys never really settle in with that, going just a little bit lighter and then doing more reps, even though they're making gains. It's an ego thing that's just hard to overcome. But yes, you're right. There's nothing like a setback.
Hmm.
It's not, things take longer to heal when you get older. It takes longer to warm up, it takes longer to recover, and it takes longer to heal. Other than that, the playing field is pretty equal if you're doing all the other things to support
Sure.
what you're trying to accomplish. So, absolutely, starting where the person is, finding right away in the early sessions where their imbalances are. They might be leaning harder on one leg than the other. It can cause hip shifting, being too like I had one guy that just wanted to play pickleball every single day, every day. And it was like, no, no, you've got to stop. If you want to do legs here and you want to do exercise, so it's getting them, it was just a tug of war getting him to back off on that because he wasn't
Hmm.
recovering. And never
Right.
Yeah.
recovering means you're never going to grow. You're
You
just
got
going
to
to
give yourself time to recover.
you're just going to stay right here. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that was a tough one. And so starting where they are, making sure that they're getting strong all the way around, balanced and using proper form. And especially with my people that say I have bad knees, I'm like, I gotcha. Because I've had my own history, right?
You
I have
knee
my own history.
replacement, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And I know all the physical therapy moves for problematic knees, and I know all the ways to get stronger without hurting it. There's certain things
wow.
that are okay for most people to do that are not okay for people that have problematic knees.
Sure. And
That's
but
the
you know that you can work around it. You can adapt
yeah,
to that. That's excellent.
right, right.
What about myths and misconceptions, particularly as they pertain to the older athlete? What do you see and how do you overcome it?
Oh, myths.
And
Uh,
misconceptions. Age is inevitable decline, that kind of thing.
well, my tagline is aging is inevitable, decay is optional. So
There you
we'll start
go.
with that
It's a
one.
great start.
That's my start. Uh, but I would say the getting rid of the old ideas that you lose weight by exercising more and eating less. That is a losing proposition. Yes, you want to have a very slight calorie deficit, but you have to
Mhm.
figure out where the baseline is first. So that's an important piece of it to make sure that you're not also losing muscle because they still have that old, even the men that grew up in my era where you just eat some cottage cheese and a slice of tomato and yeah, you're
Right.
good. Like, okay,
That's
well, it's
might need
not
a
bad,
little more than that.
not enough. Yeah, having this idea that less is more is more. That's not always true.
Right. You
I
can
know.
overdo it. You can overtrain.
Yes, yes,
If someone who runs 7 days a week, for me, like I said, I'm in the middle of, well, I'm on the taper on marathon training, which is a nice place to be. I can finally step back a little bit. But if I tried to run 7 days a week, I'd be working against myself. And you just have to keep in mind that balance. It's so important.
yeah. You can sleep when you're dead. You know
Oh,
that's no, no.
no.
You don't
Sleep
want
is
to die
critical.
that way. You could
Sleep,
die.
you could die from sleep deprivation. Yeah.
Yes. There's
So,
all these old sayings that that you have to work really hard. Um, Another one that I've dealt with lately is that counting macros and tracking calories is an eating disorder. Who can live like that? I don't want to count how many ounces of this I'm eating or how many calories of that I'm
sure.
eating. And what I say to that is if I tell you that you need to track your budget, you need to take your income and you need to budget for different things and you need to save and you need to monitor your spending. Is that a money disorder? Nobody ever says that. Everybody says,
Right.
no, that's very prudent to do that because knowledge and awareness is power. So all we're doing is looking at a calorie and macro budget. It's budgeting. So how do you know where you are if you don't even know what you're doing now? I had a lady who
Yeah.
was stuck forever and she couldn't lose. And I made her finally I said, prove me wrong. Do what I ask and prove me wrong. And I made her track her calories for 3 days, just 3 days. She was eating 800 calories a day and she was overweight. Well,
Wow.
yes.
So
Huh.
she had some metabolic issues
Yeah.
that were needed to be addressed separately.
Well, her
That's
body
tough.
was working so hard to save her life by living with a starvation amount of food. I mean, that is, for an adult woman, 800 calories a day is a starvation diet.
Right. Yes.
And so what does the body do? The body hangs on to all the fat. God forbid, should you run out of fat and die, and it
Right.
will jettison the muscle, which then lowers your basal metabolism. So
Yep.
then the 800 calories is no longer cutting it. So if you're going to lose, yeah, now you have to eat less than that. It was just like
It's a vicious cycle.
major, major sea change with that. And I got her eating, it was really hard to get her to do it, but got her eating 1,200 calories, finally went up to 1,500, lost the weight.
She felt better. She was more active, burning more calories.
How can I
So
be eating double the calories and lose weight? It's just like, yeah.
metabolism's a funny thing. Well,
Yeah.
Janet, I'm growing mindful of your time here, but there's just one more thing I want to ask you. Um, when you're designing a training program, if you were limited, let's say you're limited to 5 movements
Oh,
in a training program, what would those 5 movements be?
they would be the basic ones. And
Hmm.
of course, they would be necessary to make sure you have all of the foundational
Yep.
stability and strength before doing them. But I would say the bar squat,
Okay.
the military press,
Posterior chain. Okay.
yeah, military press, bar squatting, deadlift,
The
you know,
deadlift, the whole posterior chain. It's
weight
it's it's great.
appropriate. Because those are three that really they activate the thing in your body that says this is dangerous. you know, and that sounds
Yeah.
weird, but what happens to the body is it excretes the hormones that are
Hmm.
needed to do something really hard, really risky. Even though I know I'm spotting them, I know they're safe, and
Right.
they have proven that they have all of the coordination for it, and they're doing it correctly. Push-ups, and I would say the leg press for people that can't do the bar squatting, because I have a few people that have spinal issues where it's a little bit.
Sure.
So now they're in a chair pushing weight. So that's good. Pull-ups,
And
doing
yeah,
pull-ups.
something for them. Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that 5? I think
Close
it's
Yeah, that
enough.
is
Good
that's fine.
enough.
That is fine.
So Janet, the last thing I want to ask you is if our listeners are interested in your book or connecting with you, where do they find your book? Where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
I would say, well, we'll definitely have the links in your show notes for the
Yes, we'll
book.
have the links out.
Right, just offhand, it's on Amazon. You can
Cool.
just type my name, Janet McConnell, in the search bar, and it'll show you this. But
Excellent.
link for that,
And
and
that's
then
Elements of Aging Well.
Elements of Aging Well. Yes, my wisdom from my journey so far.
And do you have a
And
website? Are you online?
I would say the best place, though, I have a website, but the place to find out more about my message and what I'm doing and more of what we talked about today would be my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And yeah, that's I post twice a week, and it's all things around healthy longevity, mindset, dietary practices, exercise, all of the stuff that we talked about. And
Excellent.
on LinkedIn, I post every day,
Sure. What's the
5 days.
title of your YouTube channel?
It's called Aging Strong for Life.
Aging Strong for Life. Great.
Yeah,
Good, good. And we
yeah.
will link to that. Like I said, we'll link to that. You could find all of this will be available on Substack in the show notes. Just look for us there. Janet, once again, thanks so much. I feel like we could
Thank
have filled
you.
3 episodes with these kinds. Still not even covered everything we wanted to cover. So I'm gonna have to ask you back. You got to come back on at some point, please. This was a lot
really
of fun.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
as we have a shared passion for healthy
Absolutely.
living and what it means right now in our lives and what it means going forward. We're on the same page with
Yeah.
that. So that's why we could talk a long
That's
time.
right.
It was
Well,
really good.
hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully, when we ask you back, you'll say yes.
Really fun. Oh, absolutely. Sign me up.
Thank you for listening. Please make sure to like or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also list the show notes and have lots of bonus content available on Substack or Instagram.